True Stories That Change You, Part 14. My Lai, Vietnam, 1968. That morning began like any other reconnaissance mission. U.S. Army pilot Hugh Thompson Jr., crew chief Glenn Andriota, and door gunner Lawrence Colburn lifted off in their H-23 helicopter, call sign Eagle 31. At first glance, what they saw looked like a battle's aftermath. Bodies on the ground, smoke rising, soldiers moving through huts. They assumed there had been heavy fighting, but something didn't add up. Each time they flew back and forth, ferrying information and checking on troops, the number of bodies kept growing. And there was no sign of combat, no enemy fire, no weapons, no shell holes on the ground. Thompson later told investigators, every time we came back over, there were more people down there dead. And they weren't enemy, they were women, kids, babies. The US Army ground troops were massacring civilian farmers and their families. He decided to land. As the helicopter settled near a ditch, the crew saw what was really happening. US soldiers firing into groups of unarmed villagers. Thompson confronted a platoon leader, demanding the shooting stop. He refused, and his platoon continued the atrocities, killing people in the irrigation ditch. As he saw them move towards new targets, Thompson flew the helicopter, landed in between the soldiers and the civilians, and told Colburn to keep the machine gun trained, not on enemies, but on his own side if they fired again. Then Andriota saw a faint movement under a pile of bodies. He jumped down, waded through the ditch, and lifted out a child still alive and in utter shock beneath the corpses. They flew the boy to safety. On the radio, Thompson called headquarters. There's a ditch full of civilians down here. We need to stop this thing right now. The crew's report became one of the first official records of the My Lai massacre, where more than 500 civilians, men, women, and children were killed. For years, the crew's report was buried. Thompson was labeled a traitor by fellow soldiers, his home was vandalized, and death threats followed him for decades. Andriota was killed in combat 3 weeks later. But when the investigation finally came out later, everything they had described was confirmed. 30 years later, in 1998, the US Army publicly recognized their actions. All 3 men were awarded the Soldier's Medal, the highest honor for heroism not involving combat. It was the ability to do the right thing even at the risk of their personal safety that guided these soldiers to do what they did. Then Major General Michael Ackerman said at the 1998 ceremony, the 3 set the standard for all soldiers to follow. This was followed by a plethora of awards, social groups, songs, biographies, and more about the men and their story. Yet, I learned about them just today. War is a disgusting and dirty business. I hold the opinion that no winners arise from war and that everyone who's lucky enough to walk away after it does so after losing a part of themselves. Despite that, these men were trained to obey orders and chose to obey their conscience instead. In that moment, morality became defined by who they stood up for and who they stood up against. All 3 of them had to have known the reprimands they'd get for resisting fellow soldiers. They did what they did anyway. Today's world is not devoid of wars either. Millions of soldiers and civilians are boiling in the cauldron of a despicable side of humanity. One can only wish there are a lot more like these 3 in the mix. Be gentle with yourself.